Welcome, everyone. Thanks very much for coming along today, and really appreciate your attendance. This is the first webinar in a series of 3 in support of our Maintenance May for 2025. This presentation will be recorded and will be available on our CASA briefing YouTube channel later in the week. You'll notice there that your microphones are muted and your cameras are turned off. If you have any questions or comments during the presentation, please do pop them in the comments or the chat tab there. You might just have to go digging for that in your browser to get that up and running. So that's our housekeeping pretty much out of the way. We've got about 30 minutes to run. I'll just do some introductions. My name is Peter Ball. I'm an Aviation Safety Advisor. I'm based in the Darwin office, and joining me today, you'll see Tim Penney, one of our safety advisors based in the Melbourne office. So we'll be co-presenting today. You good to go, Tim?
Thanks, Pete. Nice to be here, everyone, and thank you so much for just giving up some portion of your day to at least, stop for 30 minutes or so to have a think about this beast called safety culture, which is something that really flows through, hopefully, everything that we do in our industry. I'm just going to start off with a rhetorical question, and I'm not actually after any answer from this question, but something that I want people to have a bit of a think about. We're all out there in industry, we're doing our jobs every day, we're trying to keep the hangar doors open and the props turning. But here's a rhetorical question that I'd like to just run past you. Where do you think that your next incident or safety event may be coming from? It's a good question. I'd like you over the next 30 minutes or so to have a bit of a think about that in the background, and we'll follow this up towards the conclusion of our seminar or our webinar this afternoon. But at the end of the day, safety, which is really why we're here, it's everyone's business, because we're all a product of our environment, and we're driven really by the learned and shared behaviours and beliefs and languages and practices that go to make up our safety culture. And people talk about safety culture a lot, and it's a word that is often bandied around left, right, and centre. But really, it actually drives what we do when no one else is around or when no one else is watching. In many respects, it's really how we do business in an organisation. So really, where does a safety culture start? And I'll just get Pete to click on, and we'll start unpacking the presentation. So the overview today is what we're going to talk about very briefly is what actually is a safety culture. And as I alluded to earlier, it's largely about how we do business around here. The second thing we're going to have a quick chat about is what is a just culture. A just culture is, again, one of those terms that is spoken about quite freely, but we're going to visit very briefly what are some of the characteristics displayed by organisations that have this thing called a just culture. And cultural maturity, what does an organisation look like that would be described as culturally mature? And finally, just a bit of a brief talk about error and violation, because there is a difference between error and violation. And as members of industry and even the regulator itself, we have to have a good understanding about the difference between those two things and how therefore we react or respond to both of those things, error and violation.
Thanks, Tim. So let's just set our baseline, and so we're all on the same page here. Let's talk about what safety is, and obviously it's making sure that we're being protected from anything coming out and grabbing us, all those different hazards out there that can come and cause some sort of unintended consequence to the action that we're looking at. We want to make sure that we're all safe, because the number one thing we all want to do is go home at the end of the day uninjured to our families and have had a productive day. Culture, which is in general a system of learned beliefs and languages, norms, all those sorts of things. It's how we behave in our environments, be that at work, in Australia, in our relevant states or organisations that we are part of. So putting those two together, and off, that's how that culture is perceived, is we see the behaviour reflected in what we do every day. So putting those two together, safety culture, it's the way we do business around here, as Tim said. And for an organisation that has a positive safety culture, they would do those activities safely. They would do them collaboratively, procedurally, and compliantly, in basically making sure that we're all doing what we need to do in an efficient manner, but also in a safe manner. One of the limiting factors there for safety culture and a true measure of an organisation's underlying safety culture is how they behave when they're facing adversity. And there's a whole range of aspects that reach out every day and slow us down from doing our job. We want to make sure that we continue to track down that compliant, safe, procedurally protected pattern of behaviour and the way that we engage with the jobs and the tasks that we get given on a daily basis. So
the thing about this, Pete, if I can just jump in, the thing about this that I think people need to realise is that any organisation, I suppose, can fake it until they make it. It's very easy to perhaps gloss over or band-aid over a poor safety culture when everything's going really well. But the moment things start to go pear-shaped, often that's when the true underlying culture of an organisation actually comes to the fore. And there's lots of things out there that we deal with every single day in industry that can put us under stress. It might be staff shortages. It might be opening up a new base. It might be introducing a new aircraft. It could even be trying to absorb a whole new CASA suite of regulation changes. There are lots of things that can put us under stress. So a poor safety culture, yeah, an organisation can probably get away with it when things are going well. But the moment things start to turn pear-shaped or get a bit difficult, often that's when the true safety culture of an organisation actually comes to the fore.
Thanks, Tim. And there's a whole range of other aspects that come into play with challenging us to maintain that very good safety culture that we all need to be aspiring to. So let's ask another question. Where does safety culture start? And it really should come from the very top of the organisation, the management, the CEO, and it should be set out very plainly on day one as part of a new employee's induction. And the leadership team, the people on the floor, the supervisors, they should also be championing that as well to make sure people understand that that is exactly what we want to do and the way we want to do it. And it requires a certain outcome that needs to be achieved by everyone on the floor, in the workshops, in stores. Doesn't matter whether they're doing ground support equipment, quality management, all those aspects. It should be plain for everyone to see that this is the way we do business around here, and have that generate that positive safety culture that is going in the direction that everyone wants. As I said there, it starts from day one. As we alluded to earlier, safety culture can be affected by many aspects in our day-to-day activities, and changing actions and priorities from management. We will go to policy and procedure to get guidance on that. Supervisory practices are a key aspect to this. This sets the tone for everyone under that level of supervision doing that particular type of activity. Goal setting and planning are key. Everyone needs to understand what we're trying to achieve and how we're trying to achieve it. So with those must be very plain. You'll quite often see in an organisation, they will have their goals up on the wall for everyone to see, and then it'll be the planning will take place, not just from a strategic level, but also on a day-to-day level, making sure that any of those aspects we talked about that can compromise a positive safety culture are not actually impacting the ability of people to stay safe. This is a really key one here, the responses to unsafe behaviour. The main thing we see or hear about from industry is when there's an unsafe act happens and no one brings up the fact that it is actually unsafe, and then don't take the time to report it either. So that's a key aspect. Ongoing employee training and motivating people to behave in a safe way, observe those policies and procedures, and also be willing to contribute to them on a daily, if not ongoing basis, and not just by reporting unsafe acts or areas for improvement, but also involving themselves in any meetings that are going on in the company to have those suggestions, because these are the people in the front line. They're the ones that are being put right in the firing line, essentially, where we often say where the rubber hits the road. That's the proof that all the policy and procedure and activities, the training and supervision are all being done in a really positive way to ensure the outcomes needed. And by involving those staff, and hopefully they take ownership of their safety, of their colleagues' safety, and proliferate that safety culture outlook as they go forward in their day-to-day tasks. Oh, right, Tim, do you want to talk to this next one?
Thanks, Pete. Some of the characteristics of a strong safety culture. Look, Pete alluded to it in the previous slide. There's that old saying that a fish does rot from the head down, and there's a big role for senior management here. I think senior management need to be aware that employees at all levels in an organisation, a maintenance org, a 145 or a car 30, they need to be aware that staff are watching your every move. They will notice how you act, how you talk to people, how you deal with bad news, how you deal with honest mistakes versus perhaps deliberate violations. And employees are very good at picking up whether or not there's going to be one rule for some and one rule for another. So yes, safety culture certainly does start at this top, and senior management are crucial to that, as the slide says, fostering a positive attitude towards constructive criticism and feedback, even from lower levels within the organisation. We talk about senior management, however, a lot of the rubber actually hits the road at that middle management level. We're talking in the maintenance world like that hangar supervisor level. So not senior CEO management, but also that bridge between senior management and the rest of the workforce and the AMEs and apprentices on the floor. At that middle level, that's where the buy-in can also really generate and grease the wheels to get a good culture up and running.
Sometimes it's difficult for the more junior or inexperienced people to voice their opinion. They think they're going to be ridiculed or told that they don't know what they're talking about. But I think it's really important to recognise that everyone has something to add in contributing to the development of an organisation and the safety culture. And quite often it's those new sets of eyes that have a perspective on what's going on in the workshop that perhaps the more entrenched people don't have.
Yep, 100%. And people, of course, are well trained and they fully understand the consequences of unsafe acts. And we'll talk about just culture in a little while, but it is entirely within the realm of just culture to have sanctions and even dismissal for employees that deliberately go and violate known standard operating procedures and act in those types of ways. Just culture applies to everyone from the top down, and people are actually not only fully trained, but they know where the line is drawn. They understand the consequences of unsafe acts. And as Pete alluded to earlier, this starts right from induction, when the first people join the company, all the way through. Thanks, Pete. And it's internal responsibility rather than just bare compliance with regulations. You know, CASA regulations are there for a reason, and the vast majority, of course, are written in blood. However, regulations still represent really just a very blunt stick, and they are essentially the bare legal minimum. What we want to see is organisations taking ownership of their risk and building in margins above that bare minimum. Because at the end of the day, car 30s, 145s in the maintenance world, they own their own risks, and therefore they are responsible for managing those on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, look, safe operation does take more effort just above that bare legal minimum. I think we might flick on to a case study now, I think, Pete.
Thanks, Tim. I'm not going to dig too deep into this. It's a great case study to go and have a read of the accident report. There's a great deal in it, but we're going to keep it fairly light for today because we're short on time. Essentially, this aircraft took off, control was lost, and crashed, resulting in the fatalities of five on board. So what I really want to touch on with this is I'd like you to ask yourselves if any of these particular contributing factors might be showing their heads in your organisation. And just have a think about it. So what happened here was they changed a cyclic control the evening before. In the first revenue passenger flight the next day, the bolt that held that control together was liberated. So, you know, this is a dual lock bolt with a nylock nut and a cotter pin in it. So clearly, for the bolt to come out, the cotter pin had either failed or wasn't fitted, and the run-on torque with the nut wasn't sufficient to hold it on. That also calls into question the independent inspection, whether that was actually carried out or not. But there was a whole raft of other contributing factors here. The fact that the stores didn't have the nuts in stock, there was fatigue, there was training, there was supervisory issues in play. You know, and these are all aspects that I think we can all relate to in an organisation that we either work in or have worked in, and quite often it's only due to people adhering to procedure and doing second checks and making sure that everything is safe that this type of activity is far less common than that it potentially has the ability to be. And as Tim said, a lot of these rules are written in blood, and having an independent inspection on flight controls is certainly one of those regulations. So a quick overview of just culture, which we've already talked about, and obviously it talks about that individuals aren't blamed for honest errors, and we'll talk about error and violation in a second. Sanctions should only be applied when there is clear evidence of a conscious violation, and the difference there is an error is a mistake, it's not intended, whereas a violation is a conscious choice of someone to ignore a policy, ignore a procedure, ignore a regulation, such as independent inspections, and just keep right on going. And that has the ability to open up that particular flight or aircraft to the vulnerabilities that those shortcomings or those shortcuts, I should say, can bring into play. So also with just culture, definitely an atmosphere of trust where people can feel free to speak up without being, held to account or blamed for trying to slow up, the output or the efficiency of the organisation. Everybody on the floor should have the same capability to call a halt to proceedings if they think that there's some sort of deviation from the plan or the procedure or the requirements for that. And this is where it comes in on day one with people's inductions. There needs to be that very clear delineation as to what is acceptable and what is not. And we're going to talk about reporting in a minute and the various ways that can happen. But certainly having that conviction to call a certain behaviour that's inappropriate for that aspect of maintenance or activity, or that the workplace activities is key to make sure that people have the confidence to do that.
Can I just add one extra little bit about
Please.
that, Pete, if you don't mind? We say in that first dot point that individuals shouldn't be blamed for honest errors, and that's fine and beaut. But although they might not be blamed, we also have to be careful that, they are not just blamed, but they shouldn't be sidelined or ridiculed or paid back in other ways. For someone that put their hand up and say, look, I've made an honest error, and all of a sudden they find their shifts for the next month being a graveyard shift, or they're perhaps paid back in other ways. If someone is blamed or ridiculed or sidelined for making an honest error, all that is going to do with the organisation is dry up and stop that reporting process. Reporting is basically a window into the safety health of your organisation. The moment you squash any type of reporting impetus, your organisation is going to be essentially traveling blind. There might be ticking time bombs in your organisation that perhaps you never knew existed. That reporting culture is key to making this whole thing work. So yeah, it's not just not being blamed. It's also not being paid back in other ways. And people do know where that line is drawn between what is behaviour that is acceptable and what is behaviour, of course, that is unacceptable. Thanks, Pete.
Thanks, Tim. So some ideas, some discussion about how to improve safety culture. Well, first of all, of course, you have to understand what it is, and hopefully we are going some way to explain that. And you need to then build on it. That will come from getting the employees invested and involved, because quite often they are the experts. They're the ones out there doing it and seeing it. They've got the experience of what goes wrong when it doesn't happen as planned, and that can then feed back in to try and achieve the required level of safety culture that you want within your organisation. And then, of course, the challenge then the ongoing challenge is to maintain that as well. So let's have a quick discussion about what a positive and mature safety culture looks like. So you may all have heard of this one. Back in 1985, Japan Airlines 747 crashed with the loss of all on board. To date, the single largest loss of life for a single aircraft accident. So the question I'm going to ask is, what do you think JAL, Japan Airlines, did with the wreckage? So this is an indication of maturity of this organisation. Not many organisations around the world like to talk about their failures or their accidents and that sort of thing, but certainly we all have to learn from our own mistakes and the mistakes of others. So when Japan Airlines do an induction for their new staff, and in fact, retraining for their existing staff, they all go through Japan Airlines Safety Promotion Centre. And in this centre, they have some display rooms. And this is the actual piece of the aircraft that failed, being the rear pressure bulkhead on that 747 that caused the loss of that aircraft. So they're not burying this in a back room. They're not trying to hide it. They are making sure that every one of their employees understands that this is part of their history, that they must learn from the shortcomings and make sure that it does not happen again, taking any steps that they possibly can to ensure that nothing like this ever happens again. So that's really the mark of a culturally mature aviation safety organisation.
Yeah, it's a good. It's certainly a good illustration, and it actually begs the rhetorical question, Pete. How many organisations do we know that would be happy to, put a piece of wreckage from one of their failures or accidents or incidents on display as a reminder? Yeah, I was quite taken aback when I heard that story, and to see the wreckage there displayed in their learning centre, it actually quite hits home. It's a very, very good example of an organisation that's not only has a safety culture that's mature, but wants to learn from the past. We've flicked a few slides around, and you probably saw it just jump up at the start of the presentation. I just asked everyone a rhetorical question, which was essentially along the lines of, where do you think your next incident or accident is going to come from? But there are two other questions that I'd like to just add to that, and hopefully you've been thinking about that first one through the presentation. The second question you can see there is, how do you know this? Okay, do you have hard data? Is it past experience? Is it chat around the smoko room at morning tea, or is it perhaps even a gut feeling? And the third question to this series is, okay, what are you as a company or as an individual in the maintenance world actually doing about it? Some really, and I'm not after any answers, but I think it's a healthy thing for all organisations every now and then to ask themselves these basic three questions, because with monotonous regularity, unfortunately in the aviation industry, after there is an accident or a fatality, people stand around and look at each other and say to themselves, you know what, I always knew that would happen. Okay. Usually with the vast majority of accidents, the telltale signs leading up to that final event are quite visible when we go back and retrace the steps of that event. What we are trying to encourage industry to jump on board with is developing a safety culture that is mature enough, and together with that, things like safety management systems, which are of course a requirement for 145 operators, to have a dedicated, strategic, deliberate approach to working out what can bite us and how we're going to manage the risks that come from that. I think there are three really good questions to think about. And going one step further, again, depending on the size of the organisation and how the communication flows within that company, it might be interesting to put the senior management team in a room and ask them those three questions. And then in another room, put the workforce as a whole, or the general workforce on the hangar floor in a room, and ask them those three questions. Because if the answers that both of those groups are going to provide will be largely different, then maybe the organisation has a communication problem, especially when it comes to hazard and risk. Again, there's no right, there's no wrong answer, but there are three questions that we often get people to think about when we talk about safety culture, and we ask people to think about how their organisation is tracking when it comes to managing risk and building a culture. Because at the end of the day, we're all, in this boat together, and as an industry and a regulator and everyone else that has touch points into this profession, we do need to start looking out for each other. So that's, I think, it for me. Back to you, Pete, to wrap up.
Thanks, Tim. Just before we go into the conclusion, let's just talk a little bit about reporting and why that is so important to an organisation and having a positive safety culture. And that is, it gives a snapshot to the organisation of what's going on out there. Quite often, we'll see an organisation put a safety management system in place, and there's a slow start, but then there's a rush of reports once everyone understands, what they're trying to achieve with a safety management system, and that they're not going to be blamed or ridiculed for reporting. But then they get worried because they're seeing all these unsafe, all these reports of unsafe acts or problems, and they think that all of a sudden we've got a bit dangerous in this organisation. But the fact remains that all of those things was already out there. They just didn't know about them. So it's a way for that organisation to become informed. And I'll take it a step further with those three questions. If some people say, why would we ask this? We might find out some things we don't want to know. But I think the question is, well, can you afford not to? Why would you not ask those three questions of your staff? All right, we're just about out of time, so we'll wrap things up. Doesn't look like we've got any questions there, Tim. So time's up. So I'll roll straight into our summary there. But yeah, look, we covered a lot of ground in a short period of time. If you want to go back and have a look, yes, this discussion today will be up on CASA's briefing YouTube channel, I think by the end of the week. So thank you for coming along today. The next webinar in this series is scheduled for Wednesday, the 22nd of May, and the third one on the 29th of May, Thursday, the 29th of May. And looking forward to other webinars in this year and next. We're always very interested to hear any of your suggested topics for these webinars. We'd much rather give you what you want than just talk about something that we feel is important. We want to give you what you want. One final bit of information there. As part of our Maintenance May campaign, there's 3 Snap-on tool vouchers up for grabs for AMEs, so unlicensed people, and also apprentices. So jump on the website there and log into that and get in the running for a tool voucher. Tim, would you like to add anything else?
Yeah, look, we just got a question that came through on the chat. Thanks, Murray. When is CASA Part 5 being introduced, which is really designed to put all the SMS requirements together, because at the moment they're spread around Part 139 airports, 145 air transport maintenance, 142 integrated flight training, etc. That is an ongoing project. What we will do, Murray, is get back to you. All this chat's being recorded with a specific answer. It is in the pipeline to consolidate all that information on SMS and the SMS requirements. Will it be this year? No. Will it be next year? Probably not. But it is in train. There are other things that we have to tick off before we get to that. But work is ongoing with that type of work on SMS, consolidating it into one particular part. And another question, Pete?
Yeah, we've got one there from Nick Booth. So I guess the response to that is really up to the individual organisation and needs to be balanced very carefully with rewarding. Some people might be serial reporters. You don't want to stifle reporting, but sometimes people might just put frivolous reports in to try and get some sort of benefit. But that, as I said, that is really up to the individual organisation to determine how they support that process and reward reporting, I suppose. So
when it comes to just lastly, sorry, Pete. Look, when it comes to reporting, and I know we've kind of left the reporting to the end. When it comes to reporting, the 2 biggest barriers to a lack of reporting in any organisation is 1, a lack of feedback, and 2, a fear of reprisal. That's probably the 2 major things. If we can, as organisations, make inroads into those 2 things, you will probably find your rate and the quality of reporting will increase dramatically. And yep, thanks guys, lovely.
All right, we'll wrap things up. Tim, thanks very much for joining me today. And look, stay safe, everyone out there. Thanks for tuning in, and also have a look at those upcoming webinars. So have a safe day and take care out there.